Welcome everybody to the Wednesday, January 8th, 2025 meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority. Ms. Thompson, would you start us off with the roll call, please?
Tyler Kinley.
Present.
Micah Bartelme.
Here.
Mike Micklon.
Here.
Steve Brummer.
Here.
Angela Jackson. Here. Elizabeth Berry. Here. Alex Deek. Milton Dehoney. Thressa Nichols.
Here.
And Kim Mays.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item up, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Mike. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. That'll take us right into public comment. If any members of the public wish to address the board, you will have 3 minutes. Ms. Graves will be keeping time. Do we have anyone signed up? Is there anyone who wishes to avail themselves of the podium? Hearing none, let's have our executive director report. Ms. Thompson.
Just a couple of things. First, I wanted to remind everybody that our first Elevate installation will be going in a week from Friday, January 17th. So that is our temporary light and sound installation at Liberty Park Plaza. It will be up from January 17th through mid-March. So I hope to see you there at some point, and please share this with your friends and family. And then just a few meeting reminders. So our January work session is January 22nd, so it's pushed a week. All of our January meetings were pushed a week due to the holiday. And this work session, and really every work session until through the summer, we will be sharing critical information with the boards for your consideration. So in January, you will have the parking budget and the first permanent Elevate wayfinding program. And then beginning in February, we will start digging into the details of our development plan work, and that work is going to continue every month until that plan is brought to council for adoption, which we're anticipating in August. So I just encourage you, if at all possible, to kind of mark your calendars for DDA work sessions and board meetings, particularly these next 6 to 7 months, because we will have critical information for you all to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any DDA member communications today? No, we'll move on. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? The consent agenda is comprised today of one item, and that would be the meeting minutes for December 2024.
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Do I support?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Consent agenda passes. New business, we do have 3 resolutions before us today. The first is a resolution to accept the FY24 DDA audit. Before we get to the resolution, Dan Merritt from Riemann will share an FY24 audit presentation. In your packet, you will find the FY24 audited financial statements and the audit letter. After the presentation, the board will vote to accept the FY24 audit. Mr. Merritt.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for having me here again for this will be our 3rd year as the DDA and the city's independent auditor. Today we're going to be talking about the results from the June 30th, 2024 audit, which was issued and filed timely in December. Similar to previous years, my presentation will cover who's on the team from Raymond, what our required board communications are with respect to the audit, discussion of financial results, and then a brief touch on upcoming accounting pronouncements, everyone's favorite topic. And finally, of course, I'll take any questions that anyone might have, though please feel free to flag me during the presentation. I'm happy to answer questions at that time too. Our team continues to be made up of myself, Daniel Clark, who is my boss, signing principal. He takes responsibility for the engagement, has many years of experience. Jen Mahares, Jacob Eisminger, and Sam Sala, who all worked on completing the authority's audit this year. First, and perhaps most importantly, the board communications, the things we're required to tell you about the audit each year. We gave an unmodified opinion on the June 30th, 2024 financial statements. That's what you're looking for from us. That's what you want. If we came in here and said we gave a modified opinion or a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion, that'd be very bad. The state wouldn't take that. An unmodified opinion is called a clean opinion in the audit business and means basically that we think you can rely on those statements to make good financial decisions, that the information within them is accurate. So that's great. Number two, one new accounting pronouncement was adopted. That's GASB 100 accounting changes and error corrections. Yes, that's right. We're up to 100 GASB standards now, and I'm going to talk about the next 4 coming out at the very end. This statement and pronouncement didn't actually have any impact on the authority's statements, but the authority, of course, evaluated with our assistance, made sure that there wasn't anything that needed to be done. There were no error corrections this year. There were no changes in the reporting entity for the DDA this year, so it didn't actually have any impact. If there are future years where there are error corrections or there are changes in the reporting unit, let's say you picked up a new fund or something like that, then we would have to do certain things under GASB 100. Third, we have to assess any accounting estimates by management, primarily the estimate for compensated absences, determine if it's reasonable. We assess that estimate. It's not really a particularly significant estimate for the DDA, but it is required. Found no issues when assessing that accounting estimate. Fourth, we have to report to you on whether or not we encountered any difficulties during the audit dealing with management. Of course, we did not. Management's work is very good. We really appreciate all of the work that finance does, and particularly Sarah's work during the audit is excellent and of the highest quality. We had no issues getting questions answered or support provided during the audit. 5 and 6, we're required to discuss if there were any material misstatements or audit adjustments noted. There were no material misstatements. There was one past adjustment. Basically, this means that we all sort of agree that this adjustment isn't very big, and we kind of push it into next year because, well, at the time the financial statements come out, we go, it isn't a good use of anybody's time or efficient use of anyone's time to go back and make this correction, so we pass on it. We did note 2 other matters. If you were looking at the audit letter in the board packet, this would appear as attachment A. Those items are recommendations that we have for management on improving processes and procedures and are very normal. In fact, it's very rare that we ever have an audit where we don't make some type of recommendation. We discussed those already with management during the audit and with management representatives of the board at the audit exit meeting. So I'm not going to go through those in any detail now, but if you wanted to read through them in detail, we can find them in attachment A, and management has already proposed planned responses for addressing those recommendations. So I expect, as per usual, that they'll be addressed by the time we come back to do the audit next year. Now let's talk, next couple of slides, we're going to talk about the authority's financial results. We're going to talk about it as one big whole organization. So this includes both the parking fund that you'll find in the financial statements and the quote-unquote general fund. Remember that within the general fund there are several funds, including, let's say, the TIF fund. So internal reporting and overall financial reporting are kind of different things, but this is everything. So this is the 100-meter level view. And by far the biggest change that happened for the authority from 23 to 24 was you ended up with more cash at the end of 24 than you had in 23. This is good. This means positive operating results result in you have more cash and investments with which to do future projects. We'll try to peel that apart a little bit in future slides. As you're getting more cash, you're also doing more projects. If you're doing more projects, that means you might have more open payments to vendors at the end of the year. Or you might have less open payments to vendors at the end of the year. Just depends on the timing of when those payments are being made. So I try not to make too much bones out of did your AP go up or down? So you can see that it went down between 23 and 24, but that just depends on did you have open payments that crossed the fiscal year. So we won't spend too much time with that there either, because really what we want to know is how is the authority doing? Are you having a positive financial result or a negative financial result? And it's clear to see that over the last 6-7 years, the authority has had a very positive financial result with that little dip in 2021 overall, and seen very, very good results. So you can see that we always like a good graph that goes up and to the right. Remember, this is everything. We'll peel apart what is general fund and what is parking fund in a little bit, but we can see good, positive, stable results. That's good. We like that. We can peel this apart slightly further and say, let's look at revenues versus expenses. for the authority as a whole. And you can see that for most years, in the last 5 or 6 years, you have revenues that exceed expenses. Again, your CPA, your accountant likes that. That means positive addition to net position for the authority as an entire whole. This is good. Just thinking about how our revenues and expenditures for the general fund, so now we'll try to focus just on the general fund, which includes TIF. You can see that with the exception of 23, since 2018, the authority has had positive results in the general fund. Now, I'm sorry, with the exception of 2023 since 2018. Now, you can think and say, does that mean 2023 was a bad year? No, that doesn't necessarily mean that 23 was a bad year. It just means that the general fund tends to operate as the project fund of the authority. So in years when you are spending out on projects, you might dip into the fund balance that you built up. It's sort of a cyclical activity, right? If you do more projects, you might end up using some of that fund balance as planned in the budget. So that isn't necessarily a negative thing, and it's generally a positive thing that revenues overall exceed expenditures. I also tend to present this slide just to show that there isn't any significant component of that positive fund balance that you have that is caught up in something else. That little difference between unassigned fund balance and total fund balance is just stuff that you've prepaid. It's stuff that you paid in advance, so it's not really available at the end of year to year to spend up. We call it non-spendable fund balance. There isn't any other big component of general fund balance that you set aside and said we can only do this with it. It's mostly unassigned for future projects. We can also see that general fund coverage ratio continues to be positive and continues to represent a stable track record for the authority. This is sort of like trying to think about the fund balance in terms of how many months of annual expenditures could we cover. This isn't a perfect picture for how the general fund operates for the authority, again, because it's such a project-based fund. If you were in a more period-to-period type of reporting situation, you'd be more concerned about like trying to keep that fund balance stable and going up. But this is still represents the fact that the authority has plenty of fund balance to do the projects that it needs to do. And as you go into a planning phase, which is what you can see there as general fund coverage goes up, way up in 24, as you go into a planning phase where you're planning to do more projects in the future, that's to be expected. Because remember, you had that dip in 23. If you're going to dip in future years to do those projects, you have to build up fund balance first. Moving over to think briefly about the parking fund, you can see that the parking fund has had fairly stable activity, and you can see what we call the COVID V in some of these graphs, where you get down to 21 financial results, and that's when everyone stopped coming out and stopped paying into the parking system as much. So you had that 1 year of negative fund balance effect where you dipped into fund balance. Again, the authority did a really great job of making sure that expenditures were controlled even in years when revenue was going down. That's unfortunately the poison pill for a lot of organizations. Revenue starts to dip and you don't control expenditures, and then all of a sudden you've eaten apart all of your savings and you have nothing left to do. The authority has continued to do a very good job in making sure that there continues to be commensurate budgeting with the revenue that's coming in. You can also see that in the parking fund, almost all of that fund balance is what is committed for parking activities. There's a little bit of non-spendable in there where you've prepaid for certain items, but again, there's not some big component of fund balance that's been set aside or committed for some other use. And again, you can see that sort of trend up and to the right, which has continued on our, I think, last slide about financial analysis, where you can see the parking fund is quite stable. And as you've controlled expenditures against revenue, fund balance continues to go up and be in that solid, stable, comfortable range where you've got money to cover expenditures in the event of any future, heaven forbid, adverse activity like another pandemic or something else that none of us can anticipate. You would have fund balance to be able to be flexible in those circumstances. Finally, upcoming accounting pronouncements. Again, the financial statements now include 100 different GASB standards, and there's 4 more coming out in the next 2 years. I'm not going to go into the weeds on exactly what these are, other than that we'll be working closely with Sarah and her team to make sure that they're properly implemented. But just goes to show there's a lot of work that goes into doing governmental financial statements, accounting, and reporting. And unless they stop issuing statements, which doesn't seem likely anytime soon, we're going to have 105 and 106 to deal with the next year. So And I think that brings me to the end of my planned remarks, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Dan. Very informative. Open the floor for questions from the board for Mr. Merritt.
I just had one question. I couldn't tease out in the materials the two recommendations that you made, that you referenced early on. So could you either explain what those were or
Sure.
tell me exactly where to find them?
I don't have the board packet up here on the computer, but if you were in the audit letter, there's an attachment A to the audit letter. You're roughly around there, I think.
Here, it's at the end of the second.
We can bring it up, Angela.
Okay, yeah. Maybe
I'll let
that's
someone work
easier.
it down on the staff.
It's just my printing.
While she's bringing up the text, the two recommendations were basically one, that, and these both have a lot to do with the new statement on auditing standards. So the AICPA tells us as auditing firms every year, you must focus on these things. And this year they put out SAS 145, which said, you must focus on internal controls and technology. And one of the things that has been coming up for everyone is related to SOC reports, or internal control reports for your technology vendors. And so they say, you as the auditors now need to be making sure that the city or the authority or the IT department with the city, which of course now does the DDA's IT compliance, is going out and looking at your vendors' SOC reports in advance to make sure that the vendor doesn't have some problem. Now, BS&A, they have a SOC report, we see it all the time. We know that there's not a big issue with BS&A, but our recommendation to everyone has been, have your IT department go look at that SOC report in advance. Don't wait until we, the auditors, come looking for it. You guys go look and make sure there aren't any problems that need to be addressed. Recommendation number 2 was about the review and documentation of bank reconciliation review. It was talking about trying to implement a new process to ensure that there are independent people signing off in a way that we can see on all of the bank recs. Bank recs are a very important control activity. Of course, the authority has been doing bank recs and carefully reviewing them for years, and we just said this year, try to have a cover sheet where you show who is signing off as a preparer, who's signing off as a reviewer. Then we as the auditors can tell really, really clearly that there are 2 people looking at that, not just one. And I believe the authorities already implemented the process.
Great, that's very helpful, thank you.
Just a quick comment. I had the privilege to meet with Dan here and Maura and Sarah, and it was a great meeting to discuss this overall. And I want to give my thanks to Sarah. It's a lot of work, and it's done in a very transparent and ethical manner, and we shall be grateful for it.
I'll second that. Congratulations again, Sarah and the finance team on another clean audit, and job well done. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion before we bring the resolution or move the resolution? Okay. Well, I'm pleased to move the resolution to accept the DDA FY 2024 audit. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the audit for FY 2024, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. The resolution passes. Next, we have 2 resolutions related to parking administration. Jada, if you could please come up and give us some background and color on what we're considering.
Sure. Thank you. So the policy you're considering today is a continuation of the work that we've been doing to formalize DDA processes and policies and best practices. Parking hourly rates and permit rates have been and will continue to be approved under the requirements of the DDA city parking agreement. So this policy does not impact that process at all. So this policy really is meant to address fees in the parking system that historically, since 1992, have been established by DDA staff and our operator staff. These fees are linked to item costs or labor costs and are tied to like a specific use or service. For example, the cost to replace a Mustang tag or the cost to relocate a meter post or kiosk during construction. So we pulled the fees together into one fee schedule document. And annually during the budget process, I'll be reviewing that fee schedule to make sure that the fees actually match the cost to deliver those services. If any changes are needed, we'll bring that to the board for consideration. And it just kind of makes sense to do that as part of our annual budget work. It's already happening, but this will, again, kind of formalize that process. So in addition to the resolution to adopt the policy today, there's also a resolution to approve the first fee schedule. So since this is the first time that we're approving this, all of the columns have the same dollar amounts in it. But it's set up in a way so that if there are changes in future years, you'll be able to easily kind of see what's changing in any given current year. And this process mirrors how many departments at the city also approve their fees. So the city approves schedules annually for things like, permit inspections and fees, hockey league rates, things like that. So this process kind of puts us in alignment with how the city handles these things.
As I understand it from my reading, Jada, there was no actual material changes to any of the fees. This is just a formalization of what's existing now, putting a policy in place, and formalizing the fee schedule in kind of a format that will track any future changes or adjustments.
Correct.
Any other questions for Jada?
I think it's something we could publish, because I think a lot of people would
I was like,
love to see, like, no increases. So that's
Great, thank you, Jada. We're going to consider these in turn. So we have first 25-0023. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution to approve the parking system administrative fee policy?
Moved.
Thank you. Support?
Support.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting 25-0023, resolution to approve parking system administrative fee policy, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Resolution is approved. Next, do I have a motion to approve 25-0024, resolution to approve the parking system administrative fee schedule?
so moved.
Thank you, Tyler. Do I have support?
second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving 25-0024, the resolution to approve the parking system administrative fee schedule, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. The resolution passes. Next up, we have special business and reports. I see nothing on the subheader. Do we have any special business or reports? Moving on, we do have some communications from the staff reports for January 2025. Well, no action is required. Please familiarize yourself with those reports. Take away information. That will bring us to our closing public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address the board? Seeing none, that will wrap us up for today. Thank you all. It's great to see everybody. Happy New Year. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Support? Support. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
You're adjourned.